everyone to Unity Live. I'm Emily Ghosh Harris,
I'm Brooklin Rayne.
and we are so excited to be connecting with Beth Rachel today. Let me share a little bit about Beth. Beth Rachel is here to support humanity in activating the original human genome and divine Earth blueprint. As a participant in the original planetary design and creation of the Earth, she draws upon her soul and cellular memory to help guide humanity back into alignment. In her private sessions, Beth focuses on supporting lightworkers and starseeds to heal their individual traumas and distortions in order to fully integrate their gifts and abilities into the here and now. And with advanced extrasensory abilities, depth of perception, and experience with evolved beings, technologies, and frequencies, come into the unique gift of being able to quickly and adaptly identify between different energy signatures, whether it's a thought form, belief, being from a different dimension, timeline, or frequency. Beth is able to get the clear details that are needed to communicate and integrate. It is for this reason that she is also an energy educator. In these times of a great awakening, we can all use support around fine-tuning and understanding our gifts, and Beth is here for this.
And aren't we all ready for more of this, right?
Oh yeah. I feel like this is a perfect time to be having this conversation.
Yes, yes. And I don't, Em, I know you were sharing a little bit before we started recording. I was mentioning how I woke up this morning and I was just like, okay, what's happening right now? Like with in the collective energy and the energy of the planets and the energy of Gaia, like something, and I literally went online to be like, okay, where are we? Let's just start with the moon. Let's keep it simple here. Let's start with the moon. And I saw that tomorrow is a new moon in Virgo, but you were mentioning some additional insights that may help give us some, some perspective on navigating through these next several days here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's interesting because there's a square with Mars. Mars is squaring our sun right now, the sun and the moon. And so we might be feeling an extra amount of tension around how we're doing action, around, how we're feeling in terms of emotions that are arising. Mars is about, aggression. It can be about rage if it's unhealthy or unhealed. And so it's interesting time, and one thing that I was thinking about on the way over here is, the 12th house in astrology, which really represents the subconscious.
Yeah.
And for those of us that have planets in the 12th house, but we all have a 12th house in astrology, right? And so, when the sun traverses the 12th house, especially, there can feel like shining a light on the subconscious and really bringing that to the surface. So that's happening for me. I'm sure it's happening for
yeah, right. I mean, we all seek to, to figure out where are the inception points of these apparent systems of struggle, and what you so beautifully share in your shadow alchemy. And I know we're going to dive deeper into that. But when we have the assistance of planetary alignments and, Father Sun coming in to really shine the brilliance on it, it's amazing, but it's also extremely uncomfortable. And I had this interesting vision. I had this interesting experience with it as I was kind of just like, okay, zooming out, zooming in. And as I was trying to feel into and articulate, like in the moment, like what it was that I was feeling in it, it to me felt like, and it all makes sense, right? But it was just like another sort of perspective on it. Like, there was like a representation of the egoic complex, of ego attachment in any, in any way. And it literally felt like a claw machine at a, at a carnival. And it was like pulling like bigger sort of, dissolve, if you will. And I was just like, wow. And so it almost presented this felt sense of like, as we become more, as we ascend, we're essentially becoming more of the everything, right? There's less, and so that's sort of the feeling I was getting this morning when I was waking up. And it's beautiful, but it's also really disorienting, because of course the egoic mind's like, no, not, so, yeah, I think all to say, Those who are joined here and now on this call, you know, if you woke up this morning feeling any of this, here are a few little things that may act as guideposts. But and again, how brilliant that we you know, coincidence? I think not. Are there? You know, Beth Rachel, in comes Beth Rachel, profound, luminous, omnipotent oracle being, to drop in and, you know, and further kind of assist and introduce yourself during this magical and intense time. So Beth, we would love for you to share a little bit with everyone about you know, anything that feels like relevant, you know, most relevant, is all relevant, obviously, about your journey here, you know, and anything, you know, that you feel wants to be shared, that we can learn and connect more with you through.
Yeah, thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you, Emily. And I'm grateful to be here this morning with you. For me, it's morning still. Yeah, you know, I was actually kind of thinking about that during my morning meditation. And something that came up as I often listen to others' stories of awakening. And there's a lot that happened, it seems like around 2012 for people, some people around 2000. But you know, often accompanied by some type of Kundalini awakening or something else sort of cracks them open. And you know, I've been asked many times, what was that point for me? And I didn't have an awakening like that. You know, there was sort of a level of consciousness that was always present in my life. It was okay to be psychic. It was okay to, you know, be into different cultures and home birth and sort of, you know, my parents were part of the hippie movement. So that was all, you know, above board and acceptable. There wasn't that level of awakening that, you know, there was always an awareness of, you know, humanity being out of alignment with the environment. Underneath that, so a lot of what I think we'll talk about today in terms of, you guys already brought up the subconscious and all this material here, you know, so in terms of what woke up for me is the unconscious, right? So all of my unconscious material, which I had just had fragments of, there were little pieces that didn't all quite add up, and I was surrounded by multitudes of denial and suppression and dissociation. So the pieces that did come up were discarded, dismissed. So I never really gave them a whole lot of attention until I was already a mother, but I was hitting my Saturn return. And there were some things that were still not quite adding up for me. And I was already working professionally as an energy healer and psychic, and working with others on their subconscious, actually for quite a few years. I hit my Saturn return, and that was the point for me of this unconscious material beginning to surface, which I describe as like the string on a sweater, that, you know, it's like you just keep pulling and you think that it's just a little thread at the beginning and you're just going to pull it. Didn't work that way. And the pulling of my string led to uncovering massive amounts of trauma and abuse that, you know, I always am, you know, I think there's so much stigma around trauma and around abuse. And so I really, sometimes I hesitate to even share that part in that way, because I think people automatically, there's an association with that. But as far as I have come to in my process, there is a huge amount of trauma and abuse throughout human race and human culture, both subtle and not subtle at all. What's happening on this bottom layer is actually would make most people's stomachs turn and, be very, very, it's traumatizing to hear about some of the stuff that's actually happening. So I think it's important to start to bring awareness and to bring these two pieces together, the conscious and the unconscious. And I think about it in terms of how it relates to our planet. And the Earth's surface, the crust, what we're taught in science class, is about 1%. 1%. And humans are 0.01%. And we use a fraction of our consciousness.
I think it's also like 1%, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, so it's like when we really start looking at this, we are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of just of our own planet, the consciousness of our own planet. Let alone if you start to explore the universe and the universes, the multiverses, creation, so there's a disorienting piece right there. Talk about the dissolution of ego, right? We have this idea that we are the center, and we have all these energies that have played on that for millennia and have kind of, it's been one of the greatest tools for keeping us as a suppressed race, is how sticky that ego is and our mind is, to the point where we think that this 0.01% and then the fraction of consciousness of that we possess is the only consciousness here that's worthy of any kind of recognition or paying attention to or having something to share or give. And it's this ego state that I'm focused on right now and helping support humanity to kind of unstick from and wake up from, because it's so necessary in order to bring these two layers and levels together. And what happens when we start to wake up these subconscious layers of material that we wouldn't even think exist. And this is, for me, it was like mind bending after mind bending after mind. And eventually you get to the point where it's like, okay, it breaks down to a certain level where we get less and less attached to a relied upon experience of mirroring, right? So we get very attached to and almost, this reaffirming of this is who Beth is, this is who Emily is, this is who Brooklyn, over and over again. And eventually when you break down so much of this subconscious, you get to the point where you're less and less attached to needing that reflection. And I think when we get to that point, we're also reaching a certain amount of wholeness within ourselves. And that's when we really, a bigger shift begins to happen for the whole of consciousness of humanity. So that's been my journey, is the continued dissolution of the identity of Beth, the identity of being human, and what it means to even be human, right?
Yeah, I love that. So, knowing that one of the things that you're most attuned to and what you've come equipped to assist and meet humanity in this now moment and doing is the restoration of the human genome. And as we know, we are the micro, as beautifully orchestrated and mentioned, of the macro of Gaia, and then of the macro of the universe, and right, and. So in, diving in, right, because just as you're bringing it in, like everybody here, I'm sure, is feeling the energy of it. It's like, and then we start to like zoom out and realize, to what degree in the system of Russian dolls we are, right? This tiny, like a speckle of soil, perhaps, right? In terms of all of it. So what are the starting point, and bringing all this, this massive and greater sort of depth of awareness into this, where does one start with that, right? Where do they even begin to dive in? And how does, your sort of connection and alchemy with the human, and activation of the original human genome come into all of that?
Yeah. I think a good starting point is because we can get to that point of disorientation and then start to leave our body. And, this is where you kind of see people start to lose it a little, is to have the orienting principle that I am always a part of source. So that part's that's a constant that's never going to change. I'm always going to be a part of source. And as part of source, I have my own consciousness, because we're not just sitting at one all the time, right? We're having individuated experiences to one varied degree or another. I have choice. So I'm part of source and I have choice. And what am I choosing? Do I choose really at the core heart of me to be here in this time, be present in this body, and always come back to that, right? So that's an orienting principle that can be really helpful, especially when you start to come up against these places where you're really challenging the identity of self, right? That portion is never going to change. And where the original human genome comes into play in that is that it's I don't want to say underneath that ego consciousness, but it is it's much more expanded than that ego consciousness. So we have to break free to a certain degree into that unknown place, which isn't really unknown. It's just unknown to our ego. It hasn't established a framework for it yet, right? Let go enough to tap into a different level of consciousness, which is that of the body consciousness, and the knowing and the wisdom of this body that already has technology built into its original crystalline structure that is meant to channel the energy of the earth. And as part of sort of, someone said to me when I described it to them, I was searching for words, and they said, oh, like, you're part of the landscape. Yeah, we're part of the landscape here. So once we kind of break free of that need for the validation of I am, and we can root into the being part that our body already is doing all the time, right? That's the whole function of the autonomic nervous system. So we're already being all the time. We're just not letting go of, of that. But that's when we really reach this shift in consciousness where, we're no longer we often hear the conversation about seeking outside of ourselves. I don't think it's so much about not seeking outside of ourselves, but not looking for that confirmation, and we're just being in the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like less identification with that outside of ourselves as the source of wisdom, right? But yet we're here, and we're here to experience our environment, and we're here to reconnect, in the unified field of oneness, with earth, with all the elemental consciousness, with all the beings seen and unseen. Yeah, I love that. While coming into a greater sense of wholeness, whereby we're navigating in a greater place of inner trust, it sounds like. So yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and I feel like in that journey of releasing the ego, that's when we can really begin to look at areas that perhaps we haven't felt, it hasn't felt safe to look at before. And that's one of the things that I would love to explore with you is this idea of going deeper and looking at those places and spaces, and do we need to take time off from life, or can we enjoy the journey in a way of, going into some of those tender places.
Yeah, it's a really valid question. I've worked with a lot of people with really heavy repressed trauma that they then come to, and it's a complex situation to navigate. And our world is certainly not designed to be supporting ourselves in a full-time job while diving into this kind of material. So it can be very tricky to navigate that situation of balancing. And that's also where titration comes in. So not, it's like, I work with some people that, are in the medicine community, and when they drink medicine, they'll get a vision, or, and they want all the information right then. And there's another level of trauma that can come with that, right? So it's often about slowing down because we have this thing called a psyche, and it's a built-in system to allow our consciousness that's inside the body to keep pace with our expanded consciousness. And when we have heavy trauma that's been suppressed, it's, storing and filing it away in specific places where it can keep it contained and continue on with life. And when we start opening that up, it's like, no, it got packed away for a very good reason. And we're not going to open all, I would not suggest opening all these boxes at the same time, because talk about ego disillusion, right? I mean, that's where people end up in the psych ward, unfortunately, and have psychotic breaks because it's too much all at once. So, finding a way to go at a pace that is in sync with your higher self, and not pushing beyond that, and trusting that your soul has got you. It's got you on the path and will guide you, be the compass. And we have a unique part of our psyche that, through my experience, that I've discovered, that I call the inner guide, which is, sorry, I have something in my eye. A portion of our soul that is within our subconscious that has agreed to be there and sort of keep track of all of these pieces. So when it's time to realign and become whole, you can align from these two places and be guided through at a pace that, does not take you to that place of complete fracture or break. Yeah.
Yeah. And from experience as well, my own personal experience of going into those deep spaces and places of trauma, this lifetime, previous timelines, whatever, simultaneous timelines, as we know, they're all happening. Giving yourself time to settle into the new operating system too. I think that goes to, along with what you're saying of like, not having it all at once, yes. And then when we do bring in a big piece, giving ourselves an adequate amount of time to really not only move through it and all the different emotions and things that will come about, and belief systems that are wanting to be rewired, of which, of course, you are so masterful at leading people through, bit by bit, piece by piece. Then allowing that precious space of integration and okay, let me now navigate through my job and my home life and all of these different things that are important to me, right? In this new operating system, and so that I can kind of get my foundation within it before going into the next big piece, right? I feel like that's, it's like everything, it's this age of AI, this age of like instant gratification and okay, let's go. And everything has to be so, and it is happening that way just by the fact of all this plasma light coming in and, all the planetary alignments, and how this truly is the age of full transparency and full disclosure. So it's all going to happen. It's just, to your point, trusting how our higher self, soul guide, all the pieces to our own unique blueprint and puzzle have already predetermined how that is meant to engage, right? And when we butt up against that, I feel like that's just another form of resistance, right? We have oftentimes have the initial resistance of even going there because it feels so much more comfortable being, even if it's like staying in a pattern of suffering, right? It's like fear of the unknown. But then when we work up the courage to go into those spaces, then it's like, okay, but let's take it step by step. And we don't have to, completely overload, the nervous system, etc. So would you share with us some of the ways in which, you find it to be, the most graceful approach to assisting others and to, how do how does one get there, right? Maybe someone knows and, they just don't know where to go, where to access, how to access.
Maybe they know that they have material there, or
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I wanted to oh, there was a thought, but when it'll come back. But the integration process is absolutely so important, and a big part of that, this is the thought, is the emotions, the feeling, and allowing for room for that, for the emotional release, the grief, the anger, the sadness, the worthlessness, all of it to come out, come through, and transform. That's part of that integration process, because it's one thing to know information, right? But we're talking about an experience. We're talking about a repressed experience that's locked inside the body, locked inside the mind, and it needs to be alchemized. That alchemy is such a nice word, but it's a process, and even in the traditional form of alchemy with minerals, and it's like there's heat, there's pressure, so we have to, this is what gets applied in our shadow alchemy, is that transformation. It takes a lot of presence, and it takes a lot of care and commitment, and feeling it, which oftentimes we don't want to do. We're happy to know the information, know it, and move on. I can't tell you how many times in my own journey people have said to me, like, can't you just be done now? Like, can't you just say stop and just be done? And God, I think back, like, what would have happened if I would have just dissociated when they wanted me to? I would have been missing this whole part of myself and of the expanded consciousness that we're talking about here today. So I think when someone knows something, but they haven't seen it yet, they can feel it. I think it's important to find someone that you trust and feel comfortable with to hold space for you through that and support you in going to take a look and dive a little bit deeper and experience what that is, and then look through, okay, so we have an experience here. This is what happened. We look at it from a perspective where it's, sort of third party or bird's eye view, not so attached and not reliving it, but being able to look at it, to preview it, and look at within that experience what we were told by the other people or person in that experience that then went to form beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about what we mean to ourselves or mean to the world, and really have limited our expression of ourself. And the feelings, what feelings did we take in from that experience? How did it leave us feeling about ourselves, about the world, about other people? And these ideas that we then form based on these experiences, even certain prejudices, or, because of these experiences, and wanting to keep ourselves safe. So it's this unraveling process of all the things that we learned through this experience. It's the same thing we can do with something that's not so traumatizing, but that we just don't want as part of our reality anymore. It's the deconstruction of an aspect of our reality, right?
Mhm. I love that. And I love how you broke it down, because a lot of times when we've been in this and we've been doing it with ourselves, and we've, at certain points in time have had others holding space for us and assisting us, we get into such our own kind of rhythm and techniques of working through, that like things pop up and we just know we have a system, and it's almost hard to even articulate, when someone asks like, well, what is your system? And it's like, good question, because you get so accustomed, to doing it, right? It's like, when I was a chef for 20 years. I don't know if I ever told you that. People would say like, oh, I love that dish is amazing, or whatever, and what's the recipe for it? I'm like, I have no idea. I can tell them like but like, I have no idea how much of this or that I put in it, right? It's just like you get in the system and you're in some other, you're just in the flow. You're in the 0 point, you're in the flow, you're in the moment, and you're just kind of, creating alchemy, right? And so for you to break it down so beautifully and so clearly, is, I'm sure, extremely assisting to so many gathered here, even those who've, found their own ways of doing it, right? It's like, oh yeah, okay. And I feel like once we open the floodgates, if let's say someone is working with you, it's not like they come and they meet you and you're holding space. To your point, there are emotions that are coming up. There are other beliefs that start to reveal themselves, right? It may not always be in that moment or in that 60 minutes together, right? So as you're talking and you're sharing, I'm seeing like, have a journal, write it down, take space to, let it, get curious. But one of the most profound things I feel like you brought in, and I feel like through all the different modalities, explored and seen and experienced personally, etc., the key, like in all of them, is that perspective of the witnessing observer, the witnessing presence, as you've mentioned, right? Coming like, yes, okay, this was me, this was some part of me. I absolutely, chose consciously or unconsciously to participate in this experience. And yet for us to be able to fully create alchemy of that experience is to take to, sort of a one step, of removal into a place of the witnessing presence. Okay, I am this eternal soul, this eternal being, looking in now, so that you can actually, if, in other words, if we're in there and we're reliving it and we're really identifying as it, who's going to pull us out of it to a point where we can navigate through it and articulate and pull out all the gems that, and the wisdom, etc. So I love that you say that, because it really is truly, I've tried to look at it or find other ways of, just out of curiosity and playfulness, of like, could you, be in it and alchemize it? And it just feels like, I haven't witnessed a process of alchemy that doesn't require one to be totally in the present moment and as the witnessing presence.
Which is a challenge if you're really triggered on something that is deeply traumatizing, to detach from that and be able to look at it. It's trauma. It's challenging for the consciousness. It's challenging for the nervous system, and it really helps to have support, at least at first, when you're beginning that process. And I know for myself that was true. I had a lot of support in the beginning. The other aspect that I think is really important for people who are having trauma come up, and I do also want to mention that trauma is not the only form of shadow. We have lots of different aspects, and you don't have to have some like heavy thing happen in order to have some shadow to work on. You don't have to have been abused or trafficked or been abducted or any of these things, but also, yes, while we're talking about it, is the relationship with the subconscious, with the inner self, with the parts of the inner self, is a very key part to being able to heal. And building that relationship is a very key part to being whole within the self. So that's also something I guide people to do. And honestly, sometimes I can spend the majority of a session just guiding this individual through their relationship with their own inner self, because that's where they're at. And that's what they need in order to find safety in this process, is they need to build trust with themselves in order to continue to explore their material. So it is important to get to know the different parts of the self, because they all have, even if you don't have multiple personalities, you have different parts of your personality. And when trauma occurs, you have different ages and stages of yourself that have different levels of awareness and different perspectives in the way that they see things. So getting to know what those are and how you can best be in service to them, in being able to really listen and hold space for that, and also to help them unwind that so that they can have that more whole perspective and see it more from that source place and integrate into the wholeness, so they're no longer a separate part of the consciousness, so that they can integrate. It's a very important part. And in fact, someone asked me just the other day, he's kind of new to remembering his trauma, and he was exploring, how do I share this with people around me without kind of blah, putting it all over them, and this is an aspect that we talked about in terms of that, having that relationship with the inner self, because then you're giving yourself that love and validation and acknowledgement that those parts might be looking for when they put it out there. So when you don't have those attachments because you're nurturing those parts yourself, then you can say it you can share that information without the attachment. And it doesn't become an uncomfortable mess. It's just the sharing of information.
Yeah, that's a beautiful space to to land in, right? And sometimes it's not like the feather. Sometimes it's like, all around, and like a balloon letting go of the air, more like, and then it's like, yeah, there we go. So profound. Yeah, it's such deep and profound work, that you're guiding people through, and and back home. And I love how you share about, we're not necessarily, diagnosable, whatever that means, right, as multiple personalities, but every single one of us has certain aspects of our timeline signatures, AKA inner child and, young adult, and that are definitely taking more center stage, through their desire for integration and coming back, and to be listened to and heard and loved upon, and and so yeah, so amazing.
Yeah, one of the key ingredients that I hear you sharing is trust, and I feel like that's such an important ingredient, and the trust to be able to allow yourself to truly feel your feelings. I feel like that is so important, because I think in the true deep feeling is the ability to alchemize through that. And I think sometimes we intellectually understand, what's taking place, and we don't take the time to really go in. And I feel like that's what you're so great at as a guide, is to help people, encourage people to feel safe going there. And I think that's such an important ingredient. Paul Selig, who was a guest on here, he says, you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. And I feel like that's so relevant for how we treat ourselves and how we look at really the collective shadow, when we're looking at addiction, or we're looking at human trafficking, or we're looking at, violence. It's like, these are all things that, collectively, that we're alchemizing as well.
Yeah. And too, like, to the point of, the beginning of this opening conversation, is like, we truly are not separate of one another, right? And the more our ego dissolves, that goes from an intellectually understood concept of like, okay, yeah, like I can kind of vibe with that, to a like, oh, okay, wait a second. Like literally, I am you, you are me. What you're going through is an aspect, like it becomes more and more and more embodied. That wisdom, that consciousness, that understanding becomes more embodied. And and it allows for us to really birth the levels of compassion, that are so assisting, and almost, I would say, go as far as to say, necessary to bridge this gap, and to really open and hold that space of the underbelly of consciousness, open, and, with enough light to be, shown in, whereby people are like, okay, yeah, I can go in there. I can see, it's like holding a flashlight, right? So that everybody can kind of go in and see what they've chosen as their collective imprint to navigate through, and to experience, and to have greater, integration of. And what better guide to assist in that, and than one who's really, taken on such a massive blueprint, such as yourself, and has traveled through such deep depths of that, underbelly of human consciousness, etc. And then again, it's not just human consciousness, as we know, because humans aren't just humans, and that's becoming further, revealed as well, right? So there's all sorts of goodies in that big shadow aspect of the collective consciousness. And I also love how you brought in to say that, one person's, perceived trauma may be another person's, everyday sort of, like, yeah, okay, so this happened, right? Because, we're all here with such unique blueprints, and maybe your greatest trauma, was being told off on the playground, one particular time, but that's in our blueprint, a massive thing, right? And it was an inception point for a myriad of beliefs and emotional imprints, etc. And so again, it's like we don't have to. It's not as though we have to take on this massive blueprint of abuse and all these things to have stuff within that wants to be heard and seen and loved and brought back into wholeness, and it's all equally as relevant. So. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, are you open to receiving some questions and from the
Sure.
participants? Okay, beautiful.
Ooh, lots of questions.
While you're searching for a question, I just have to tell you, when you were kind of doing the cavern, and everybody kind of goes in and get their goodies, I got this like image of like reverse pinata, like, it just made me laugh.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I was seeing it as like, when you're at like a slumber party as, as a child, and, you're like, guys, let's go into that room in the basement that like no one ever goes into, right? And like, you go first. No, you go first. Like
Somebody pushes somebody down the stairs.
yeah, exactly. And then everybody's like, oh, we'll close them in there. There you go. There was your trauma. Yeah.
I'm
I
wondering.
learned how to teleport quick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Bilocate.
Destiny, would you like to share your question?
Yes, please. I'm trying to get on here, like pull myself up here, and I'm having issues with my technology, it seems. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to turn my video on and I'm having problems with that. Does that, okay, wait a minute.
Ah, there you are.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this I believe is my next step, is because my subconscious is not in alignment with my conscious mind, and I'm noticing all these different like you said, identities And I'm at a place where I'm noticing that it's been like I'm actually in different identities. Like I'll go from one to another to another. And is there help for that? Because I feel like, I guess you could say I am probably in an advanced case of where it's difficult to stay fully in my body. And I'm noticing identities that are taking me out of my body.
How long have you been noticing that for?
Well, I'm gonna say that this has probably been going on for years. I'm just not fully aware of it until now.
Okay, that's great. That's beautiful, actually, because that means that a part of your consciousness is ready to become more whole, ready to become more whole, right? So what you're describing sounds like you do have some defined personalities that you're slipping in and out of, that you probably created to survive some difficult situations. You may know what some of that is, and some of it you may not remember yet. And some of it, more than likely, portions those personalities are holding for you, right? So our subconscious, our consciousness is so intelligent. It divides up this difficult material so everybody holds a piece so that it's more manageable, right? And then, but then at some point when your consciousness and your soul get aligned, which sounds like it's happening, it wants to become whole. So everybody's kind of got to bring their piece in, right? And so this is the part that's important, to have that titration and go one at a time. And I think a great place for you to start is creating safety in the body. What does it feel like to be safe in the body? How do I experience safety in my body? What does it feel like to be safe in my body on this earth at this time, with all parts and pieces of me being safe simultaneously in this body at this time? Would you like that frequency download right now? Okay, so just say yes, and just allow white light to come all the way in to all the parts and pieces of you that are needing it now, all the way through that first chakra into the center of the earth, and just take a deep breath with it. Yeah. And there's so much love and compassion for you. You're surrounded by so many angels and beautiful light beings that are here to support you doing this work. They've always been there, but they're really there's so much support for you. I don't know if you know, like, but it's probably the way that your, physical light is set up, but there's just beams of light coming from behind you. I don't think it's a coincidence. Some smoky quartz or black tourmaline to help you ground into the body, spending time outside on the earth to help you ground into the body. And then get that journal if you don't have it already, and start writing what your experience is with each of these parts of you that are coming through. Allow them to have a voice. It's important right now. I know that it's scary. I feel the fear in you. So trust in the process of what your soul's bringing forward. And it's okay to allow all these parts to have their own voice. They can have their own section in the journal. They can have their own journal, but start to allow more information to come through that's makes them a little bit more concrete.
I feel like, I feel like some of these parts are actually letting interference in. Like they feel like
are allowing interference in, is that what you said?
Are bringing things in that I don't want here.
They quite possibly may be, they quite possibly experienced things where those gates were opened for them through traumatic events, and they're still holding that open tie and portal. And they're also holding information that you might not want to know yet. So again, you have choice. You get to choose what information and what energy comes in. You can use that source light to disentangle, have that part disentangle from anything that's not the pure information your soul has to give at this time.
Okay, there's like a part, I don't mean to keep taking up the time. There's like a part of me that feels like if I'm in this other identity, that I don't have the power to fend off these things.
So in that case, you got to follow that fear and come to terms with it, because it's not true, right? Because the truth is that you are part of source energy and you always have choice. So it's just disentangling that, follow it until you can disentangle it, find out where its hook is, and release it, because it's not actual truth with a capital T. Nothing's greater than your choice and your connection with source, okay?
Thank you for that. Thank you. Oh, I've been waiting for weeks for this interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, so
And
much
I
love
think
to you.
I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you, and I appreciate this. Thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So wonderful to have
Destiny.
you here, and yeah, such sage wisdom and beautiful light, and it feels like it would be a wonderful opportunity for the two of you to go deeper in this. So thank you for having the courage to come forth and share a little bit
Absolutely.
about yourself, Destiny.
Thank
For
you.
your vulnerability, because it helps everyone.
Absolutely. Your
Yeah.
courage and your light gives everybody else an opportunity to step into those places that, you know, have been holding on to fear as well. So thank you. Okay. All right.
Beth, would you share with us your offer? I know you have an amazing offer for
Mm.
our community.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would love to. So there's a free offer, which is a little snippet that I had been inspired to create for people that are working on manifestation, that maybe not even manifestation, but just to like shift this aspect of their life, and it's there, nothing's working. You know, they've tried the positive affirmations, the this, the that, and maybe even different ways of working with the subconscious or praying, and still there's a sticky point that's not shifting. So the free offering is, I think it's about a 25-minute recording to meet the part of your subconscious that I call the protector, which is, you know, it's been protecting us for so long that it's not always in current time. And so it can often create the exact opposite of what you're currently desiring, because it's triggering something from the past that the protector was set up to protect you from, because there is that correlation going on. So I take you to meet that part of the subconscious, to look at what maybe is hanging on in there, to sort of, that's creating this block toward the desired aspect of your life. And then from there, there's a 3-week course, or I mean, it's self-guided, so you can do it as quick as you want, really, but it's 3-hour-long recordings into the inner world, and learning about the different parts and pieces of your own psyche in different ages and stages, and learning how to bring them together, work together more. There's a group manifestation at one point. There's opportunities for each one of them to release in unique ways that are kind of fun for them, and definitely empowering for them. Have a sacred experience with one that's having maybe the hardest time with something, have some individuated time with them. And again, always working on the integration, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. For those of you that feel in resonance with this, I highly recommend you dive into these beautiful offerings, because it's a wonderful opportunity to experience the omnipotence and wisdom and grace and illumination of Beth. And I know that we will be putting those links in the email that goes out with the recording of today's gathering. But you can also access them as well. Is this correct? Through perhaps through your website?
BethRachel.com. Yeah.
Okay, yes. And as well as one-on-one work and lots of other amazing things that are on the horizon that I know that you've shared that you're about to bring into offering. So yeah, lots of opportunities.
Beth, this has been such an incredible conversation. It's such an important topic. I hope we can have you on again because there's so much to explore, and you've really given us such a helpful way of, tools and navigating. And so thank you for sharing your wisdom, your grace, your heart with us today.
Yeah, so grateful. And, knowing that we've just scratched the surface of, of who you are and why you're here. So we would love to have you back again. And we look forward to hearing how everybody has received this beautiful wisdom today. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Yes.
And stay tuned for some more to come. I know I feel energy forecast and astro update bubbling up here. So, and also community connection and heart-based gathering and connection too. Feels like it's in the making. So we look forward to having you all back soon and wishing you an amazing new moon in Virgo / Sun meets Mars.
Squaring Mars.
Okay. Let's all have fun this weekend.
So much love.
Can I mention one more thing? Sorry. Yes. There's also an option for a discounted session with that package which you might not see on the website unless you click into the free offer. So I just wanted to mention it so that if that's something that somebody wants, you can get the course plus a session for the price of one single session. So look.
Wow, amazing. I would
look for that.
And a session with Beth, and we'll be sure to share that in the email that goes out to
Thank you for bringing that forth.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for listening and that might be on the listening to the recording. And I'll also want to say for everyone, in this topic of shadow, just that sometimes our shame of what we're experiencing keeps us more stuck than the shame and the fear. And so the courage, like Justine, I hope I'm saying that right, displayed today is so important in breaking out of that first stage. So I just really, want to honor that.
Yeah, such a beautiful point.
Thank you.
Yeah. So much love to everyone.
Yes, lots of love.
Lots of love. See you soon. Bye.
Okay.